Good morning and welcome to the Global Current. I'm Alex Krause.
And I'm Dominique DiMarzio.
This week in news, an activist in Saudi Arabia sentenced to floggings.
Belgium's successful counter-terrorism efforts.
An analysis, upcoming Greek elections and financial Eurozone panic.
A comparison in media coverage between massacres in Paris and Nigeria.
And an interview with Fulbright Scholar Heidi Erbsen on her experiences after a year in Russia.
Thanks for tuning in and enjoy the show.
And now, Safeya Terasad reports on the Saudi Arabian activist sentenced to public flogging.
Human rights activists are outraged at the Saudi Arabian officials for sentencing online activist Raif Badawi for public flogging. CNN reports that Badawi is being sentenced to 10 years in prison and 1,000 lashes for the crime of insulting Islam. In 2008, Badawi was arrested for founding Free Saudi Liberals, a religious dialogue and discussion forum. Though he was released that same year, in 2012, Badawi was arrested again on the charge of apostasy and sentenced to 7 years in prison and 600 lashes. Following an appeal, the court is overturning the prior conviction and instead issuing a harsher sentence of 10 years in prison and 1,000 lashes. These lashes are being carried out publicly in front of the Al-Jafali Mosque in Jeddah over the course of 20 weeks. A representative from the U.S. Department of State expressed the department's concern over the sentence.
We believe that when public speech is deemed offensive, be it via social media or any other means, the issue is best addressed through open dialogue and honest debate. We support efforts to promote human rights around the world, and this is something that is a regular part of our discussions with the government of Saudi Arabia.
The Guardian reports that Saudi Arabia is being criticized abroad for Badawi's harsh sentence. Critics are specifically denouncing what they perceive to be a double standard in how Saudi Arabia's government condemned the attacks in Paris, yet demonstrates intolerance of free speech at home. According to The Guardian, the first of the lashes was carried out on Friday, January 9th, after Friday prayer. Despite international outrage, the flogging will continue unless a doctor finds him physically unable to continue the punishment. This is Safeya Terasad reporting for the Global Current.
Bill Golba reports on the successful counter-terrorism operation in Belgium.
On Thursday, police forces in the city of Verviers, in eastern Belgium, raided a suspected terror cell, resulting in a shootout that ended with 2 of the suspects dead and a third injured in police custody. Speaking at a press conference shortly after the dramatic events unfolded, prosecutor spokesman Eric van der Supt had this to say.
We found that this group was about to commit terrorist attacks in Belgium. During the search warrant in Verviers, certain suspects immediately opened fire with automatic weapons at the special forces of the police. They opened fire during several minutes before being neutralized. 2 of the suspects were killed, a third one has been arrested.
Mr. van der Supt went on to report that no police or bystanders were injured in the confrontation. Belgian journalist Mark Eickhout told the BBC that the trio had planned to attack a Belgian police station in order to cause maximum casualties to law enforcement. Citing an unnamed Belgian counter-terrorism official, CNN reported that additional operations are currently underway throughout the country, with a particular focus on the region around the capital, Brussels. The official also said that the apparent plans of the ISIS-trained militants represent a shift in ISIS strategy. Before the U.S.-led and Western-backed air campaign against ISIS in Iraq and Syria, the terror organization reportedly had shown no interest in launching attacks against the West. Now, European security agencies are keeping close tabs on several groups who have returned to their home countries after fighting for ISIS in Iraq and Syria. Reuters reports that Belgium has been a leader in the effort to monitor returning militants, currently tracking about 100 of its citizens who have gained training and combat experience with ISIS. An estimated 170 are still fighting for the terrorist organization, representing the highest number per capita of any European Union country. Coming just a week after the deadly attacks on Charlie Hebdo in Paris, the BBC notes that no definitive link has been established between the attackers in France and the suspects in Thursday's raid. However, the militants in Verviers could have been motivated to accelerate their plans in response to the French attacks, leading to fears in Europe that other attacks could be on the way. This is Bill Golba reporting for the Global Current.
Blythe Brady discusses the upcoming Greek elections and how the current Eurozone panic may impact outcomes.
The year 2015 raised the curtain in Europe, where long-standing issues have come to a forefront in the last few weeks. While France struggles with the aftermath of terrorist attacks, the Eurozone as a whole is suffering under the worst deflation trend of the euro in its 16 years. The euro inflation rate has dropped to a new 5-year low of 0.3%, according to The Guardian. A downward trend in both the headline and the core inflation indicators has continued since the summer of 2012, reports The Economist. Furthermore, the exchange value of the euro to the US dollar has sharply declined over 2014, reaching a current low of $1.16 to €1. These figures, combined with the high unemployment rate across the European Union of 11.5% as of July, demonstrates an ongoing trend of economic troubles. These trends echo sinisterly the last Eurozone crisis of 2008, where the Greek default on debts triggered a landslide of panic and economic uncertainty within the bloc countries. At the center of relief attempts then and now is the European Central Bank, or the ECB. The ECB has proposed a program called outright monetary transactions, which would allow the central bank to directly buy bonds from member countries struggling economically. Essentially, the outright monetary transactions would help ease the financial burden on indebted states by purchasing state bonds. The objective of such a plan is to tackle high borrowing costs for governments that are a result of the fear that the country concerned will abandon the euro. The outright monetary transaction plan was originally proposed in 2012, but has never been put into practice by the ECB. The program's aim is to avoid a breakup of the euro under individual states' pressures, and though it has not yet been implemented, it has restored some confidence in the Eurozone markets, reports the BBC. That being said, the low inflation rate in the Eurozone has caused uncertainty within non-Euro countries, such as Switzerland. On Thursday, the Swiss National Bank abandoned the minimum exchange rate of 1.2 Swiss francs per euro, reports the New York Times. This reflects a decreased confidence in the euro and an increased confidence in the US dollar. Therefore, the outright monetary transactions proposed by the ECB would come at a beneficial time were they to be implemented soon. However, the program faces a legal challenge from Germany, the economic powerhouse of the Eurozone. Germany's federal court challenged the outright monetary transactions legality in the European Constitutional Court of Justice, arguing that the implementation of such a program was beyond the ECB's mandate, according to the BBC. Germany states that the ECB does not have the authority to effectively finance government deficit. On Wednesday, Advocate General Cruz Villion, a top EU lawyer, published an opinion stating that the ECB must have broad discretion in its role of framing and implementing the monetary policy of the European Union. In this influential but non-binding opinion, the Advocate General went on to state that courts lack the expertise and experience needed to criticize the operations of a central bank. The European Central Bank faces another challenge from a familiar corner of the Eurozone bloc. Greece, whose struggles seem to encapsulate the trends in the Eurozone, is facing upcoming parliamentary elections on January 25th. In light of these elections, the ECB is threatening to cut off funding to Greece's lenders in the hopes that the result of the election will not make such a move necessary, reports Bloomberg. The election hinges on the willingness of the Greek voters to accept a continuation of the strings-attached international bailout package. If the upcoming election put in power a majority of politicians opposed to the bailout, the austerity program then will no longer be a guarantee of money from the ECB. Mario Draghi, the president of the ECB, is continuing a tactic of the bank which was successfully used in the Irish and Cypriot cases, where the prospect of losing central bank funding spurred politicians to act in accordance with the ECB proposals. The ECB's fears that the Greek voters will elect austerity opponents is justified. As of this week, the far-left Syriza As of this week, the far-left Syriza party holds a small but steady lead in the polls over the current ruling party, New Democracy. Syriza is opposed to the austerity approach, which has been the guiding principle in Greece for the past 4 years. The leader of the Syriza party has made it clear recently that he has no intention of making unilateral decision on Greece's obligation to its creditors. This is seen as a signal that a Syriza-led government would not shock markets with an immediate default on debts. Instead, Syriza is committed to the goal of ending austerity through an upsurge in social spending, according to The Economist. Syriza's long-held lead in the polls, despite the ECB's threat to cut off funding to lenders, show that the Greek population remains confident in the position in the Eurozone. The voters seem willing to call Draghi's bluff on his threats as the election draws near. The Greek elections in 2 weeks marks a pivotal moment in the European Central Bank. With low inflation, high unemployment, and low exchange rates, confidence in the Eurozone and with the ECB is dropping. If Greece were to elect an anti-austerity and thus an anti-ECB policy government, it is likely that other countries will lose confidence in the central bank's ability to manage and control the vast Eurozone. Additionally, the election of a Syriza-led parliament would also make it more difficult for the ECB to push forward its outright monetary transactions, because Greece, as one of the countries most in need of such a program, will have essentially voted against it. Combined with the challenge from Germany, the ECB would have to re-examine its ability to enact outright monetary transactions, at a time when such fiscal easing would be most needed in the Eurozone to minimize panic in the market. The results of the Greek elections could have a long-reaching effect on the ability of the European Central Bank to perform its duties, as well as effects on the Eurozone and the European Union as a whole. Once again, Greece is on the world stage, but whether the ECB will be a deus ex machina or a tragedian is yet to be determined. Reporting for the Global Current, this is Blythe Brady.
Liza Bell analyzes the differences in media coverage of the massacres in Paris and Nigeria and what they say about comparative governance.
While various news agencies are covering the Unity rally in France after the deadly Charlie Hebdo bombings, there is an absence of coverage on another equally important event. In Nigeria, Boko Haram in recent weeks began a series of attacks in the northeast of the country. One attack involved a girl that was around 10 years of age detonating explosives in a northern Nigeria marketplace. However, several news agencies such as CNN have paid little attention to this occurrence. Many seem concerned about the absence of American representation at the French Unity rally more than the other terrorist attacks taking place in other parts of the world. Although both tragic events are newsworthy, what is the reason that Paris has seen more coverage than Nigeria? Some analysts argue that this media coverage can be a question of indifference, racism, and media bias. A viable reason could be that the coverage of the Paris attacks is more prominent simply because the region is more easily accessible to journalists than a dangerous region like northeastern Nigeria. The Atlantic brings up the point arguing the Paris attacks focus on a publication touched a nerve with the members of the media worldwide. This is an important matter to focus on in reference to the Paris attacks, as news agencies such as Fox News have been heavily advocating freedom of speech amid these events.
The fact that we have to have this debate in the U.S. over whether or not we're going to support free speech or we're going to support safety for journalists and editorial personnel really is as insane as it is heartbreaking, and it's not right, and it feels very very awkward.
Along with Fox News, Al Jazeera has been pushing freedom of speech since 15 of their own journalists have been detained in Egypt. Just like the popular Je suis Charlie, Al Jazeera uses the hashtag #FreeAJStaff on their broadcast to not only show their solidarity, but also their support for freedom of speech. It is not as if there is a total ignorance of media coverage in Nigeria. A global media campaign spread quickly last April when Boko Haram kidnapped about 200 schoolgirls. There is more to the lack of media coverage of Nigeria compared to Paris, however. This discrepancy in media coverage really puts emphasis on more than just the terrorist attacks themselves. It emphasizes each government's efficiency in governing and coping with such atrocities. In regards to the bombing, Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan called the attack a dastardly terrorist attack, whereas after hundreds were killed in Nigeria, President Jonathan did little to address the issue. President Jonathan's hope for re-election next month may be a critical reason for his silence on the matter. According to Majid Cheto of Teneo Intelligence, by acknowledging the scale of the violence, he's acknowledging a certain degree of his failure as a president, so he's not going to talk about security with less than 6 weeks to go before the election. Moreover, after the attacks in Paris, over 40 world leaders and about 3 million people marched in solidarity against these extremist attacks. BBC reported on how President Hollande led the Unity March to support his citizens during this time. These two attacks demonstrate that the efficiency of government plays an important role when dealing with media coverage. In light of France's effective governance, Paris received much more international media coverage with the topic of its Unity March as a positive response in the wake of such atrocity. This is Lazabelle of the Global Current.
And finally, associate producer Daniel Gray sits down with former Global Current producer and current Fulbright Scholar Heidi Erbsen on her experiences after a year abroad in Russia.
Heidi Erbsen is a graduate of Seton Hall University and a former executive producer of the Global Current. She is currently a Fulbright Scholar working in Yelets, Russia. Hello, Heidi, and welcome to the show.
Well, Daniel, thank you for inviting me to be on the show. What I'm doing in Russia right now is I'm working at Yelets State University in the city of Yelets, Russia, on a Fulbright Scholarship. And what that means is I work at the university as a teaching assistant. I work 20 hours a week teaching students different subjects from grammar to conversational topics and even American literature. And I work not only as a teacher of English language, but also as culture. So my job is working as a Fulbright Scholar to kind of incorporate American culture and give the students an opportunity to ask questions about American culture and get to know me better and just participate in kind of a cultural exchange through education.
As a former college student yourself, what do you think is important about this cultural exchange you teach?
Well, as a college student studying at Seton Hall University, I was fortunate enough to be able to learn Russian and to learn Spanish and to study abroad while I was attending Seton Hall University in Spain. I studied abroad, and during the summer, because I was learning Russian, I had the opportunity to work abroad in Russia. So I think the cultural exchange that I'm bringing here is it's important because it gives students the opportunity to learn about a different culture through an exchange experience, not just reading in a textbook, but having a live, actual person here explaining it. And I think my goal while I'm here, my mission is to give students the inspiration to know that they can go abroad themselves, that it's not just something that, someone can come to me and we can learn by learning in the university, to give them the initiative, the inspiration that they too can go abroad, they can see themselves, so they can do the same thing I'm doing. And in my teaching, when I'm teaching different subjects such as grammar or conversational topics, I think it's important in the teaching especially to give students a bigger perspective. I mean, even in Seton Hall University, many of the professors that we have are international. They have international experience. So this cultural exchange that they give us at our university, I hope that I can give students here.
What are the economic and social situations like for the young people you teach in Russia?
Most of the students, economically, socially, I'd say about the same as many of the students that I studied abroad with. The tuition for the university here is much cheaper, of course, than Seton Hall University or any American university, probably just because our education costs in the U.S. are so high. But I think economically, socially, it's hard for me to differentiate. I interact with my students on a personal level, based on them being my students, based on the intellectual material we discuss. So it's hard for me to know, actually, the economic backgrounds that many of them come from. But I think it's probably standard middle Russian class, as far as I know. A lot of the students here, they receive a stipend for living. Similar to the scholarships that we get at Seton Hall University, and a stipend for food that they get, and I know it's very important to them, just as any college student.
You say you work 20 hours a week. What do you like to do on your time off?
Well, on my time off, teaching is a pretty intense job. So for every 20 hours that I teach, I probably spend maybe 15 hours preparing to teach. So I spend a lot of time preparing, but also the city that I'm working in, Yelets, has its own skating rink. So when I got here the first week, I actually bought ice skates. So I go ice skating a lot of times. Actually, on my free time, I spend with my students sometimes. So we go ice skating sometimes. A few of my students really like singing, so we get a guitar and pick some songs in English and Russian together, and we sit around and learn the lyrics. I have to learn the Russian lyrics and struggle through that, and they have to learn the English lyrics and struggle through that. And then learning about the Russian culture. I've spent a lot of time going to museums and then researching about the different people who are famous from the city that I'm from. The university that I work at now is actually called the University of Yelets, named for Bunin. And Bunin is a famous writer that is famous from the city of Yelets, and the university is named after him because he studied here, and he was actually the first writer to win a Nobel Prize. So I've been learning interesting facts about the city, trying to interact with my students as much as possible, the different people in the city, to learn about the culture, and really to take advantage of everything that the city has to offer and what I can learn living here. Because I've had other experiences abroad in Russia, but none so long. When you're living abroad in a country for a month, maybe even 2 months, maybe 3 months, you don't really get the full experience. So while I'm here for an entire school year from September to June, I really want to get the full experience of what it's like to live in a city, to get to know the city, to get to know the people. So that's what I've been doing in my free time. Besides going ice skating, doing some sports on the side, I just try to stay involved, be involved with the city, get to know the city a little bit better.
With the tensions between the U.S. and Russia, what is it like to be an American living there?
Honestly, with my job here at the university, I don't feel any of the tension. I mean, sometimes I hear my colleagues, students talking about the tensions, the issues in Ukraine and all the complications, but here I'm not working, the students don't see me as the American who came to work in Russia. They see me as Heidi. They see me as their teacher. They see me as their friend. They see me as a young person who just graduated college and is coming to learn with us, to work with us. So I really haven't felt any of the tension. Sometimes just because I know in the back of my mind there's tension, I'm a little weary when I walk into a store or when I'm riding on the train or the bus somewhere that someone will know I'm American. But it's not justified. It hasn't been justified that I'm worried that something is going to happen, that there's going to be any uncomfort, because I haven't confronted that in anybody. When I tell somebody I'm American, I haven't once seen a look of, oh, you're American, that sometimes you would expect. So it's not really something that's affected my work. It hasn't affected my relationship with my students, my colleagues, or even the people in the town that I live in.
What is your opinion on Russia? The people, the diversity, the way of living?
My opinion on Russia. Well, obviously I like Russia quite a bit because it's my 5th time already that I've been here. One thing I can say about the people I've noticed is they have a kind of genuine nature of hospitality. I mean, it's kind of a joke here with me and my Russian friends that there's the American smile. Americans are always smiling, especially me. You always have a smile on your face. And there's kind of a stereotype that Russians are colder, that they walk around with angry looks on their face. And I mean, I don't necessarily know that I had the stereotype before I came, but talking with some of my students, they say, yeah, it's a typical stereotype. But one thing I notice is it's not that Russians are cold necessarily, it's that they're more genuine. They open themselves up when they're ready, when they trust you. When I was having my orientation in Moscow, they actually said the difference between Americans and Russians is that Americans are like peaches, soft on the outside but hard on the inside. But Russians are like coconuts, hard on the outside but soft and open on the inside. And you really see that when Russian people invite you into their homes, they're so hospitable. They will prepare their entire house for you. They will open everything. They say, treat yourself like it's home. They have tea. They force you to eat cake and drink tea until you can't eat and drink anymore. So that's one thing I really notice and really like about Russian culture, is that they're genuine. They're open to you. They're open to the people that are close to them. And the people that are close to them are really the most important people. As for the diversity, at my university, I see a lot of actually. The university that I'm working at, we have a lot of students from Turkmenistan, and they have a lot of different festivals. And there are a lot of different performances from different groups. I mean, students from Turkmenistan performed and had their cultural dances, and it was really interesting. You see the different diversities. And there are also some students that come from Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan that are Russian. Their parents were Russian, they speak Russian, they grew up in a Russian community in these countries abroad, but they also have an air of understanding the different cultures from Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. So it's really interesting. You see the perspective that Russian communities are everywhere, in every country, every former Soviet country. But the Russians that live there have a sense of a different identity. So when they come back to Russia, you see this difference. So I can say that diversity, you definitely see it in the university, and the way of living, it's comfortable for me because the people are so genuine and hospitable.
I think I know why you would recommend students applying for the Fulbright, but why would you recommend students to pursue it?
I think maybe a better question is, why wouldn't I? If you're a student who really wants the experience to work abroad, you have some experience working abroad, you want to continue and you really want to get to know a culture, which I think all the students at the diplomacy school and the School of International Relations and Diplomacy really want to do, then there's really no better way to do it. Because a lot of programs that you go on studying abroad or working abroad for a summer, it's 4 months, 5 months tops. It's not enough time. It's enough time to just get comfortable in a place, but it's not enough time to get comfortable and then start living in a place. Because usually you spend, the first month you're in the honeymoon phase of being abroad. The second month you're in the realization hits. The third month you're finally settling in, and usually most programs are going away. So the Fulbright program, it gives you the chance, not only it gives you the chance to get comfortable, but it gives you the chance to make an impact on people's lives, to show them that you're comfortable living here in their country, to get to know people, to get to know the people. So I think that's why I really recommend the Fulbright, because it's a program that's not just focused on, studying abroad, learning a language. It's focused on learning the people and getting a real exchange, not something that, you have a grade. For Seton Hall, when you study abroad, or for any university, when you study abroad, you have a grade. Your only grade on the Fulbright program is the grade you give yourself, the impact you see when you're working with the students. So I think that's the main reason I would recommend it, because it's a longer time period, and it's as much as you want to make it. It's your experience. And also, more on the Fulbright Scholarship, I guess. It's a really good way to get to meet other individuals who have the same goals as you. When we first arrived for the Fulbright Scholarship, there's 22 Fulbright students working, teaching English in different cities in Russia, and we all met. And I think I've been around a lot of smart kids at Seton Hall University, a lot, but I've never been around such a group of different-minded individuals, unique individuals with a similar goal. I mean, we were completely different. We're all completely different, but we all had the similar goal of wanting to learn about a culture, of wanting to know more, of wanting to make a difference. And I've been around groups like that at Seton Hall, but I've never really felt it to that level. Different extremes, people from all across the U.S., different economic situations, social situations, but we all had the same goal. And that was really a great thing to see, a great thing to be a part of.
Thank you, Heidi. I hope your insight abroad has taught our listeners something new about Russia, as well as shatter some stereotypes like you mentioned. You sound like you enjoy your work, and your students seem to deeply appreciate you. Good luck with the rest of your time there, and thank you for coming back on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's great to talk to you, and I hope that you and the Global Current have a great rest of the year.
Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of The Global Current. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. I'm Dominique DiMarzio.
And I'm Alex Krause.
We'll see you next week.
The Global Current is brought to you by the School of Diplomacy and International Relations at Seton Hall University. Our executive producer is Bill Golba. Our co-executive producers are Daniel Garay and Felicia Sharabali. Our technical producer is Evan Doolittle. Our news and analysis editors are Gabriela Taveras and Catherine Beebe. The theme song is Acid Jazz by Kevin MacLeod. This has been the Global Current on WSOU, Seton Hall's Pirate Radio.